It was amazing to see the liberal media meltdown yesterday as they actually had to deliver news to their audience that, yes, it looks like a grand jury is going to be impaneled in the Russian collusion hoax case. Their faces, their reaction, their reluctance to even deliver this news, and the way they lied to their audience and spun the news, it's actually quite dangerous. We're going to show you what they did over there in that fever swamp at MSNBC in just a second. But first, how about how Fox News delivered the information to their viewers? You know, the viewer base that's about 10 times bigger than all the other guys. This is how they did it.
Fox News can confirm that Attorney General Pam Bondi today signed an order directing an unnamed U.S. federal prosecutor to take evidence to a grand jury relating to an alleged conspiracy to tie then 2016 candidate Donald Trump to the country of Russia. Now, Fox News reviewed the one-page order just hours ago signed by the Attorney General. A source familiar with the probe confirms this as well, while a DOJ spokesperson declined to comment on this report of an investigation. Fox is told Attorney General Bondi is taking the referrals from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, quote, very seriously. The spokesperson says that Bondi believes there is, quote, clear cause for deep concern, end quote, and a need for the next steps. Now, this move, Will, comes just a couple of weeks after the Director of National Intelligence, you see her right there, Tulsi Gabbard, sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding what she says proves there was a conspiracy to undermine Trump's candidacy and later his first term in office. Now, to be clear today, there are no charges that have been filed, no indictments. This is incredibly early in the process. What we have here is taking evidence the Justice Department believes it has to a grand jury to secure an eventual indictment or indictments. We don't know exactly where the grand jury will meet. We don't know who will go before the grand jury, and that's by design, because grand juries determine if there's enough evidence to indict, and grand juries are secretive in the American legal system, so it's normal not to know all of the answers. Again, the DOJ declining on any comment regarding this investigation. But, Will, big news, this was signed by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, today to take this evidence of an alleged conspiracy to a grand jury with the hope to get an indictment or multiple indictments.
Now, that, I gotta say, was a brilliant example of delivering news and information to a viewer about a major story developing in Washington, D.C. And if you paid close attention, that Fox News reporter did not take ownership of the story, didn't cheer it on, didn't say, yeah, this is great, go get him, Pam Bondi, MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. It wasn't any of that. And in fact, when reporting the details of the story and the potential that there might be a grand jury handing down criminal indictments at some point, he, as a good journalist or reporter should do, actually spoke in third person about the reports and about the information. DNI Tulsi Gabbard said this and claimed that. And again, just delivering the information, the truth, the facts to the viewer without actually being partisan, without actually taking on some sort of vested interest in the outcome. Now contrast that with how MSNBC delivered the exact same story at the exact same time to their viewers. Watch carefully. You might see a slight difference in the delivery of the information.
A couple of weeks ago, Hallie, when really the headlines were dominated by the Jeffrey Epstein controversy, and then the president was sort of trying to change the topic very obviously and in many different venues, was trying to bring up these unsubstantiated claims about the role he argues former President Obama had in the 2016 election and trying to suppress some information that he says would have been damaging if it had come to light. And so then you have the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, come to the White House briefing room, come to the podium and try to share some of this alleged new evidence. Well, now you have the Attorney General saying that they're going to try to take that information, which, remember, they had announced a strike force to look into what they call this new evidence and try to evaluate it to see if there could be any potential criminal indictments that they would follow. And the thing that matters here is that this is basically a grand jury investigation that's being launched, but that will happen in secret. This is behind closed doors. And and it's completely unclear whether it will yield anything new. It's unclear that we will ever learn anything new about it because it could be under seal, but it really does bear repeating. This is looking into something for which there is no evidence to back it up, and it's really, it seems, a politically motivated move to keep the focus on one of the president's clear political foes and talk about basically anything else.
Like I said, you have to have a keen eye of observation for this to pick up on the very subtle, slight differences in how the news was delivered on MSNBC. And I want to point out again, the Fox News report, it wasn't partisan. It actually wasn't taking sides. It wasn't in any way cheering this on. It literally was just delivering the facts and information to their viewers. But did you notice? Did you see? I think you did. I think if you're used to our media analysis here on this show, I think you probably picked up on it pretty clearly. Now, when you continue flipping around on MSNBC and you turn to some of the opinion-based programs, it got even worse. Here's our buddy, Joe Scarborough.
Jonathan Ramirez, this is extraordinarily stupid. It's extraordinarily stupid on so many counts. If you look at the timeline doesn't add up. It's like when Donald Trump is saying that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton created the Epstein files. No. That all happened during Donald Trump's first term. You look at the timeline here about what happened and when it happened. Barack Obama had nothing to do with this by anybody's accounts, and especially by the Senate Republican Intelligence Committee run by Marco Rubio, who afterwards said that it was Donald Trump's 2016 campaign that created a, quote, grave counterintelligence threat to the United States of America. That was Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State. That was every Republican on the Senate Intel Committee. After pouring through all of the documents, that's what they found. And when poor John Durham was made to sacrifice his professional career to go around the world investigating the investigators, he found nothing and ended up making a fool of himself. I mean, we even found out that the two documents that supposedly, fed into the Clinton conspiracy, that she was the one pushing this, actually was Russian disinformation. So, again, they know in the Justice Department.
Now, half of what you just saw there, if not more than half of it, was completely bogus, lies made up by Joe Scarborough, fed to him by his pals, either at the New York Times or the same pals within the intelligence community that fed him a bunch of garbage while this was taking place. But the bottom line is Joe Scarborough doesn't want any more investigation into this matter. Joe Scarborough does not want the Justice Department. A beautiful thing about a grand jury and about the Justice Department bringing up charges, or once a grand jury does hand down indictments, about having an actual trial, is that the defendants can have discovery. The defendants can make their case. The defendants can actually go through the discovery process and pull up any information that they want to do. The defendants, assuming that it's, let's say, James Comey or James Clapper or John Brennan or whoever happens to be indicted in this whole thing, can actually make the case to the general public as well as to the jury in the courtroom that, oh, no, we were doing our job. We were following obvious Russian malfeasance connected to the Trump campaign. Why wouldn't Joe Scarborough want all that evidence out? Let's do it. Are you kidding? This would be the biggest faceplant of the history of the world if Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino moved down this road to indict members of the Obama administration and then have all that evidence come out that proves, they were just following the evidence because Trump really was working with the Russians. Right, Joe? Why wouldn't you want that? Why do you want us all to forget about Russia? You're singing a really different tune now, Joe. We remember you. We're quite sure you used to sing a different song.
To believe Donald Trump's version of this event.
Yeah, but I agree, Mika, with what Kenny said. Like, why keep going back to it? Why keep muddying the water when you have Marco Rubio and the Senate Intel Committee, your own Secretary of State, saying Paul Manafort and the 2016 Trump campaign posed a, quote, grave counterintelligence threat to the United States of America? You have John Durham admitting that there wasn't a Clinton conspiracy, that actually the two emails at the heart of that, even though he spent the entire report trying to prove this, in the annex, he hides it in the annex. And, the two key emails were actually most likely products of Russian disinformation. Like, Move on. Get past it. The only people talking about Russia right now are Tulsi Gabbard and others.
Get past it. Nobody's talking about Russia. That was so 10 years ago when we were in charge of the media narrative, and all we could do was talk about Russia. It's an amazing turn of events. Why? Why does MSNBC not care about this anymore? You'd think they'd want to win more Pulitzer Prizes on this story. It was so successful for them in the past. Remember? In fact, you could argue that the Russian collusion hoax helped the Democrats win the majority in the 2018 midterms that then led to a completely different set of impeachment trials. Remember, they won the majority in 2018 on the backs of the Russian collusion hoax. And then when they had the power in the House, they did bring up impeachment charges, but it wasn't about Russian collusion because even they knew that it was all bull. That's okay. Nicole Wallace, look at how happy she is to deliver this news to her viewers. See, I want to pause here for a second and explain why we dwell on this. Because if, in fact, indictments are handed down by a grand jury, and if, in fact, there are criminal trials against the former FBI director or the former CIA director or the former director of the National Intelligence, if, in fact, Barack Obama, former president of the United States, is named as a conspirator or an unindicted conspirator, if Hillary Clinton is brought up on charges, the viewers of these broadcast networks, the viewers of CNN and MSNBC are going to be dumbfounded because people like Nicole Wallace haven't actually been delivering facts to their viewers. They've been delivering theories and hopium and a bunch of fever dreams about how Trump is a Russian asset and about the entire team and about how they deserve to be all in jail because of Russian collusion and the walls are closing in and all the things that they've been feeding them. And it's dangerous, you see. By the way, it's just as dangerous as people on the right side of the political spectrum constantly feeding their audience guarantees that Obama's guilty of treason and he's going to be sent to Gitmo and Hillary's going to be frog marched out in an orange jumpsuit. You don't get that on this show either. I actually am critical of my colleagues who do that. Don't sell your audience something that you don't know is true, factual, or likely to occur. I don't want to sell you hope. I don't want to sell you some sort of fantasy that they're all going to jail. No. But they do the opposite over there. And then when facts do come out and when charges are brought, they were sure that Trump was going to jail. They were sure Trump wasn't going to be able to run for office again. They were sure that Trump was going to be a broken man. And the next thing you know, Trump is reelected. Think of how devastating that is to their audience because they're not in the business of news. I keep telling you this. They don't deliver news and information to their viewers. They paint them a story, a fiction, a fantasy. And it's great for whatever little ratings they still have, I guess. They're still trying to make the most of it. Nicole Wallace is actually one of the highest rated shows on MSNBC, such as it is. So here's how she delivered the information, such as it is, to her audience.
Some more news breaking this hour to tell you about. Attorney General Pam Bondi has ordered a grand jury investigation into the so-called Russiagate conspiracy allegations made by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. A senior Trump administration official confirms to NBC News. That investigation was first reported by Fox News. These are unsubstantiated and largely debunked allegations by the Trump administration that former President Barack Obama and his aides in the intelligence community ordered a probe into the 2016 Trump campaign's connections to Russia to ruin his chances of becoming president. The source tells NBC News that a letter signed by Pam Bondi instructs an unnamed federal prosecutor to begin presenting evidence to secure potential indictments, although it is unclear what the charges would be and exactly who the grand jury will be targeting. We'll stay on top of that story. Thank you for letting us into your homes. We are always...
I do love that they saved it until the very last news item on the show, too. Oh, by the way, in our final minute, let's tell you this. See, I would think that would lead the show. Look at her face. I just want to revisit one aspect of this because the misinformation continues from these so-called news outlets and these teleprompter readers. Take a listen to this and tell me if you can see right through it.
That investigation was first reported by Fox News. These are unsubstantiated and largely debunked allegations by the Trump administration that former President Barack Obama and his aides in the intelligence community ordered a probe into the 2016 Trump campaign's connections to Russia to ruin his chances of becoming president.
Right there is the lie. First of all, nothing's debunked. You know, if it were debunked, then I'm sure that they would show evidence of the debunking, and nothing's been debunked here with regard to what the grand jury is going to be hearing and what the testimony is based on the declassified documents. But that last line there, did you hear what she's telling her audience? Because understand, people who watch MSNBC all day, they don't really know this story. They haven't been living it like you and I have for the last 10 years. Listen to that last part. This is how she's telling her viewers the allegations are, or what the allegations are.
2016 Trump campaign's connections to Russia to ruin his chances of becoming president.
That's not what Barack Obama ordered. Barack Obama did make an order. He ordered his intelligence community to create an assessment that found intelligence to back up the assertion that Barack Obama was making, that Russia had successfully interfered with the election and that they did it to help Donald Trump. It wasn't to keep him from being president, because the order came on December 6th. It was to undermine his ability to function as the president. He had already won the election. So she just lied, or she's stupid. She doesn't know the story. The allegation is not that Barack Obama ordered the investigation to prevent Donald Trump from winning the presidency. Now, that was Hillary Clinton working with James Comey ahead of time. It didn't work, but they certainly tried. No. Barack Obama's involvement, really, his key involvement, was after the fact, where he set up the intelligence community that you paid for with your tax dollars to create that assessment that falsely claimed that Russia had successfully interfered with the election, thus planting the seed in the minds of every American voter that maybe Trump didn't legitimately win the election because Russia hacked the election, they claimed. And number two, they did it because Putin is best friends with Trump. He did it to help him. There's no evidence to support either of those things. Barack Obama knew that. John Brennan knew that at the CIA. James Clapper knew that at the Office of DNI. And James Comey knew that at the FBI. They ignored that truth, and they created the intelligence community asset to support Barack Obama's desired result. That's what's at play here. Nicole Wallace just lied to her viewers. Back to the real news here, which is, yes, a federal grand jury is impaneled, and that federal grand jury is going to look at evidence brought by a prosecutor. Now, you heard in the Fox News report, we don't know who that prosecutor is. I have a hunch. Let's get to that in a second after we hear John Solomon from Just the News deliver what he hears about the location, the jurisdiction of this grand jury.
This is a major development. We told you last week that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, had given permission for a strike force to begin. That's a very specific tool the Justice Department uses on major conspiracies. And we told you then we would know it was getting serious when the grand jury jumped into action. We now know that a grand jury will be impaneled. Most likely, my sources are telling me, it could be in Florida, where the raid of President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home happened. So that is the very latest.
Florida. The grand jury might be in Florida. Why is that relevant? Well, first of all, it's incredibly relevant because it won't be a D.C. grand jury impaneled where 90% of the voters in the District of Columbia voted for Joe Biden or for Hillary Clinton. Also relevant that Florida is, well, more politically friendly, certainly, let's just say, number one. Number two, they're tying this to Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago raid on the files that the president had in his possession down at his home, where the FBI raided and confiscated reams and reams of documents. Why? Well, because the theory goes that some of those documents were the very documents that have now been declassified, proving exactly what happened in the Russian collusion story. And the FBI and the Biden administration, they wanted those documents to hide the truth from Trump and eventually the American people, and to set Trump up. If that's the case, and that is part of the conspiracy, not only does it mean the jurisdiction can be Florida, but it also extends the timeline on the statute of limitations to when that raid took place, which is well within the 5 years necessary for a lot of the crimes being considered. Which brings us to one more factoid in this opening segment, and that is the U.S. attorney involved. You have to understand that we're still waiting for a lot of the U.S. attorneys that President Trump has nominated to take over in districts all around the country to actually be confirmed by the Senate. That's a problem. We need the president's men. We need Pam Bondi's men and women in those positions instead of holdovers or what they call career prosecutors who have stayed in the Justice Department since they first joined the government, you know, under Barack Obama. We don't want those people handling these things. We want Trump's nominees. And, well, I've got good news in that regard. Remember how Fox News said we don't know who the prosecutor might be? Well, if John Solomon is correct, and this is going to be down in Florida, we have a pretty good idea. In fact, I reported it to you yesterday on my Substack, Larry VIP. You can subscribe if you'd like. It's free. The first quiet domino, Trump's new U.S. attorney in Miami, matters more than you think. That's right. Jason Redding Quinones, a Miami native who's just been confirmed as one of President Trump's very first U.S. attorneys. There are only a couple of jurisdictions, including Washington, D.C., a key U.S. attorney. That would be Judge Jeanine Pirro. She was confirmed on Saturday, but so was the U.S. attorney in Miami, who would, if that's where the grand jury is impaneled in the neighborhood of Mar-a-Lago, well, he would be the one coordinating this grand jury and working on behalf of the federal government to see if any crimes were in fact committed. That's probably the best scenario you can imagine if you're Donald Trump, if you're a Republican, or if you're just an American who still cares about the truth and about justice.